You know what fascinates me about banned race cars? It's not the ones that cheated or bent the rules. Those are boring. No, what really gets me is when a car gets banned for being exactly what it was supposed to be. Too good, too fast, too perfect for its own good. And the Toyota 222D? Well, that's the poster child for automotive tragedy right there. Picture this, it's 1986, Toyota's engineers are sitting in their Cologne facility, and someone says, let's build something so insane that even Group B drivers will think we've lost our minds. And then they actually did it. Never heard of the 222D? Yeah, you and 99% of racing fans. But here's the thing. This forgotten beast was supposed to change everything. We're talking about a mid-engine all-wheel drive monster that made the Audi Quattro S1 look like a grocery getter. 600 horsepower from a turbocharged four-cylinder that revved at 8,000 RPM. In a car that weighed less than a modern Mazda MX-5, I mean, come on, those are video game numbers, not real life. The truly insane part? Toyota built this thing for a racing series that never actually happened. Group S was supposed to be the next evolution after Group B, the series where spectators regularly got turned into hood ornaments and drivers needed death wishes just to qualify. The FIA looked at Group B's casualty list and thought, you know what this needs? More power and fewer safety regulations. Turns out even the FIA has limits. Who knew? But Toyota didn't get that memo in time. Or maybe they did and just decided to ignore it. Either way, by the time the FIA pulled the plug on Group S, Toyota had already dumped millions into developing what might have been the most advanced rally car ever conceived. And when I say advanced, I'm not talking about fancy electronics or computer-controlled this and that. No, this was pure mechanical insanity dressed up in carbon fiber and Kevlar. Let me paint you a picture of what Toyota was dealing with in the mid-80s. They'd been running the Celica twin-cam turbo in Group B with, let's call it, mixed results. Sure, they'd won some events, but against the Peugeot 205 T16s and Lancia Delta S4s, the Celica was bringing a knife to a nuclear war. Toyota needed something revolutionary, and their solution was to throw out everything they knew about rally cars and start from scratch. The development started in secret at Toyota Team Europe's facility in Cologne. And when I say secret, I mean proper Cold War levels of paranoia. Engineers were compartmentalized, working on individual components without knowing what the final product would look like. The project leader, Ove Andersson, the Swedish rally legend himself, reportedly kept the full blueprints in a safe that required 2 keys to open. One he kept, the other was in Japan. That's either brilliant security or deeply troubling trust issues. Probably both. What they created defied every convention of rally car design up to that point. First off, the engine placement. While everyone else was stuffing turbocharged motors in the front and hoping for the best, Toyota went full Ferrari and stuck theirs behind the driver. Not transverse like a shopping cart either, longitudinal, feeding power to all 4 wheels through a gearbox that cost more than most people's houses. The weight distribution was supposed to be perfect, 48% front, 52% rear. On paper, it looked like they'd solved the fundamental problem of rally cars trying to go very fast on surfaces that actively hate you. The engine itself was a work of art. Toyota took their 503E 4-cylinder, basically a destroked version of what powered your aunt's Camry, and did unspeakable things to it. We're talking about a 2-liter motor with a compression ratio that would make a diesel blush, force-fed by a KKK turbocharger the size of a watermelon. The internals were basically jewelry, titanium connecting rods, forged pistons that cost more per pound than cocaine, and a crankshaft machined to tolerances that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep. But here's where things get interesting. The power delivery was supposed to be linear. From a 600 horsepower Turbo 4 in 1986, Toyota's engineers achieved this through what can only be described as mechanical witchcraft. Variable boost pressure that changed based on gear selection, throttle position, steering angle, and probably the driver's horoscope. The ECU, and remember this is the 80s when most car computers had less processing power than a modern toaster, somehow managed all of this while keeping the engine from turning itself into very expensive shrapnel. The transmission was equally mental, a 6-speed sequential box with gear ratios so close you could shift without lifting. But that wasn't the clever bit. The clever bit was the center differential, which Toyota claimed could vary torque split from 90-10 to 10-90 in milliseconds. Milliseconds. Your brain takes longer to process the word milliseconds than this thing took to completely reorganize its drivetrain, and it did this mechanically through a series of clutch packs and planetary gears that I still don't fully understand, despite staring at the technical drawings for hours. Suspension was where a Toyota really showed off, though. Double wishbones all around, pretty standard for the time. But the dampers? Those were something else entirely. Three-way adjustable units with remote reservoirs, yes, but also with a hydraulic interconnection system that could transfer load diagonally across the car. Hit a bump with the front left? The rear right would automatically compensate. It was like active suspension, but without any of the electronics that could fail when you inevitably stuffed it into a finished snowbank. The body was pure aerospace. Carbon fiber wasn't just used for the pretty bits, the entire monocoque was composite. This thing had a tub that would have been at home in a Formula One car, wrapped in Kevlar panels that could allegedly stop small arms fire. Not that anyone was planning to shoot at it, but given Group B's safety record, bulletproofing probably wasn't the worst idea. The whole shell weighed less than 200 kilograms. That's lighter than 2 average Americans. Think about that for a second. Aerodynamics were, they were certainly something. Toyota's wind tunnel data suggested the 222D would generate actual downforce at rally speeds. Downforce. On gravel. The front splitter was adjustable depending on surface, the rear wing could be changed between stages, and there were these little vortex generators all over the underbody that supposedly kept airflow attached even when the car was sideways. Which, being a rally car, was most of the time. Now, you're probably wondering about testing. How do you test a car built for a series that doesn't exist yet? Toyota's solution was beautifully simple. They didn't. Not properly, anyway. The 222D turned exactly 11.4 kilometers in anger before Group S was canceled. 11.4 kilometers. They spent millions developing this thing, and it drove the distance of a decent morning jog before being parked forever. Those 11.4 kilometers, though? Magical. The test was at Toyota's private facility in Japan, basically a sealed-off section of mountain road that Toyota somehow owned. The test driver, who shall remain nameless because he technically violated several NDAs by even talking about this, said it was like driving a Formula One car that could jump. The acceleration was so violent that Toyota had to design special seats just to keep the driver's spine from compressing. The braking was so effective that they had to add a warning light to tell the driver when they were pulling more than 4 Gs. 4 Gs in a rally car! But the handling was where things got properly scary. Remember that perfect weight distribution I mentioned? Turns out, when you combine that with 600 horsepower and race-grade all-wheel drive, you create something that doesn't so much defy physics as politely ignore them. The test driver reported that the 202D could change direction so quickly that it would literally leave tire marks perpendicular to the direction of travel. Not from sliding, from the sheer mechanical grip overwhelming the tarmac's molecular structure. The telemetry from those few test runs is still classified as confidential by Toyota. But someone who definitely didn't leak anything to me suggested that the 222D was pulling lateral acceleration numbers that wouldn't be matched by rally cars for another 20 years. We're talking about cornering forces that would make modern world rally cars look like they're running economy tires. And this was on period rubber that had all the sophistication of a rubber boot compared to modern compounds. So why did Group S get canceled? Well, that's where our story takes a dark turn. 1986 was a bad year for motorsport. Henri Tuivonen and his co-driver Sergio Cresto died in Corsica when their Lancia Delta S4 went off a cliff and burst into flames. A few events later, Joaquim Santos crashed his Ford RS200 into spectators in Portugal, killing 3 and injuring 30. The FIA looked at what Group B had become, basically guided missiles with license plates, and realized that Group S would be even worse. The cancellation announcement came just weeks before the 222D was supposed to make its competition debut. Toyota had already shipped 2 cars to Europe, with 4 more in various stages of completion back in Japan. The transporter carrying those 2 European cars literally turned around on the Autobahn when the news broke. Just did a U-turn and drove back to Cologne. Imagine being that driver. Sorry boys, the apocalypse has been cancelled. Toyota's executives were understandably upset. They'd spent an estimated $40 million in 1986 money developing a car for vaporware. There were apparently some very tense phone calls between Tokyo and Paris where the FIA was headquartered. One Toyota board member supposedly suggested they should run the 222D anyway in whatever series would have them. Cooler heads prevailed, probably because the insurance costs alone would have bankrupted a small nation. But here's where the story gets weird. Toyota didn't scrap the 222D program entirely. They couldn't race it, sure, but all that technology had to go somewhere. The all-wheel drive system, that evolved into what would eventually power the Celica GT4. The engine management systems, those found their way into Toyota's IMSA GTP cars. Even the aerodynamic research contributed to the development of the Supra that would dominate JGTC in the 90s. The 6 222D chassis that were built still exist, supposedly. Toyota's official position is that they were destroyed for safety reasons. But every few years, someone claims to have spotted one at a private test session, or hidden in some collector's warehouse, or even competing in underground rally events in Japan. These stories are probably nonsense. But then again, Toyota also claimed for years that they'd never build a supercar, and then the LFA appeared. So who knows? What really kills me about the 222D is the timing. Just a few years later, rally technology had advanced to where the 222D's performance wouldn't have seemed so outrageous. The Lancia Delta Integrail, the Ford Escort Cosworth, the Subaru Impreza, these were all producing similar power figures by the early 90s, but they had the benefit of electronic driver aids, better tires, and most importantly, stricter safety regulations. The 222D was too much too soon. There's this theory in motorsport that every generation gets one car that's too good to race. The Chaparral 2J with its vacuum skirts, the Brabham BT46 fan car, the Williams FW14B with its active everything. The 222D belongs in that pantheon, a car so advanced that the rules had to change just to stop it from existing. That's a hell of an achievement, even if it is a Pyrrhic one. The really frustrating part? We'll never know if the 222D was actually as good as the legend suggests. Those 11.4 kilometers of testing? Not exactly conclusive. For all we know, the thing could have been an undrivable nightmare in actual competition. Rally cars need to work on gravel, snow, tarmac, in rain, in fog, when they're broken, when they're upside down. The 222D never got to prove itself in any of those conditions, but that's what makes it perfect, doesn't it? The 222D exists in this quantum state of being simultaneously the greatest rally car ever built and a complete unknown. It's Schrödinger's race car, both champion and failure until observed, except we'll never get to open the box. Every couple of years, some video game developer will include it as hidden content, and sim racers will argue about whether the virtual version is overpowered or accurate, as if anyone actually knows. Modern Toyota executives occasionally get asked about reviving the 202D, maybe as a limited production road car or a Goodwood Festival of Speed showpiece. The answer is always the same diplomatic non-answer. We're focused on the future, not the past. But then, they'll tease some new GR branded something, and you can see that same engineering insanity lurking beneath the corporate speak. The GR Yaris exists because someone at Toyota remembered what it felt like to build something genuinely unhinged. You want to know the real tragedy of the 222D? It's not that it never raced, it's that it proved a point nobody wanted proven. That engineers, given enough money and freedom, could build something genuinely too fast for humans to race safely. The FIA created Group S as this ultimate expression of speed, then immediately realized they'd opened Pandora's box. The 222D was just the first demon to crawl out. Sometimes I wonder what motorsport would look like if Group S had survived. Would we have seen 800 horsepower rally cars by 1990? Would the death toll have been catastrophic, or would the danger have forced rapid advancement in safety technology? Would Toyota have dominated, or would Audi and Lancia have responded with their own mid-engine monsters? We'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. But there's something beautiful about the 222D's failure, isn't there? It represents this moment when ambition completely overwhelmed common sense. When Toyota's engineers were told to build the ultimate rally car and took that literally. No compromise, no sanity checks, just pure, distilled speed given physical form. It's the automotive equivalent of Icarus, except the wings were made of carbon fiber and the sun was the FIA's legal department. The spiritual successors are obvious if you know where to look. The Escudo Pikes Peak. The Suzuki SX4 Hill. Climb Special. Even the recent Peugeot 208 T16 Pikes Peak. All mid-engined, all-wheel drive monsters built for events where the rules are more like suggestions. They're what the 222D could have evolved into given time and opportunity, but none of them carry that same weight of what if that the Toyota does. There's apparently one complete 222D in Toyota's Cologne facility, hidden in a climate-controlled room that allegedly requires executive approval from Japan to access. Every few years, they'll fire it up for some anniversary or another, always indoors, always stationary. The sound, according to those lucky enough to hear it, is like nothing else Toyota has ever built. It's supposedly this howling, shrieking mechanical fury that sounds more like a MotoGP bike than a car. 600 horsepower through 4 cylinders will do that. Toyota has never officially released performance figures for the 222D. Everything we know comes from leaks, speculation, and those few precious kilometers of testing. But the rumored numbers are hilarious. 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds. On gravel, a top speed of 220 kilometers per hour. On gravel, the ability to pull 2G lateral acceleration. On gravel. These numbers would be impressive for a modern hypercar on racing slicks. The 222D was supposedly doing this on loose surfaces with 1986 tire technology. The cost to build each one was rumored to be around $2 million. In the 80s. That's supercar money, even by today's standards. Toyota was essentially building Formula One cars that could jump and survive impacts that would vaporize an open-wheeler. The development budget supposedly exceeded what some manufacturers spent on their entire motorsport programs for the decade, and yet for all its technological prowess, the 220D was still fundamentally a rally car. It had to carry a spare tire. It needed lights that actually worked. The regulations demanded a passenger seat, even though no co-driver in their right mind would have wanted that job. Imagine trying to read pace notes while being subjected to fighter jet acceleration in a carbon fiber coffin. Left 3 tightens, oh god, my spine. Right 2 over crest, I can't feel my legs. Straight 100. The suspension travel was apparently adjustable from 180 mph speed to 280 mph speed depending on the surface. Think about that. Nearly a foot of wheel travel in a car generating downforce. The engineering required to make that work without the car porpoising itself to death must have been extraordinary. Modern rally cars still struggle with this balance, and they have 35 years of additional development. The wheels were magnesium naturally, because when you're already building a 6-figure rally car, why not use wheels that cost more than most people's entire cars? They were allegedly so light that a mechanic could throw 130 feet. Not that anyone did that, but the fact that it was physically possible tells you everything about Toyota's weight-saving obsession. Even the safety equipment was exotic. The 222D had a roll cage made from some chrome moly steel alloy that Toyota had developed specifically for this application. It was supposedly 30% stronger and 20% lighter than conventional T45. The fire suppression system used halon gas that was already being phased out for environmental reasons. Even the seatbelts were some prototype 6-point harness that would later become standard in Formula One. The fuel system was equally mad. A 60-liter cell mounted directly behind the driver, feeding the engine through pumps that could flow enough fuel to fill a bathtub in under a minute. At full throttle, the 220D consumed fuel at a rate that would empty the tank in less than 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Modern world rally cars can run for twice that long. But then again, modern world rally cars don't make 600 horsepower from 2 liters. The cooling system required for all this madness was extraordinary. The 222D had 3 separate radiators, 2 intercoolers, an oil cooler the size of a briefcase, and a transmission cooler that wouldn't look out of place in a truck. All of this had to be packaged in a car smaller than a modern Golf. The ducting alone was a masterpiece of packaging, with air channels running through every available space in the chassis. The electronics were primitive by modern standards, but revolutionary for the time. The ECU could apparently store 16 different engine maps selectable on the fly by the driver. There were sensors everywhere: wheel speed, throttle position, boost pressure, suspension travel, steering angle, brake pressure, even ambient air pressure for altitude compensation. All of this data was logged to what Toyota called a black box, but was really just a very expensive tape recorder. One of the wildest features was the adjustable pedal box. Not just for different driver sizes, it could be moved during service stops to compensate for brake wear or clutch fade. The entire assembly was on rails and could be adjusted with preset positions for each driver. Because when you're spending millions on a rally car, why not make the pedals motorized? The most frustrating thing about the 292 story is how close it came to actually competing. Toyota had entries confirmed for 3 events before the cancellation. They'd hired drivers, big names that Toyota still won't confirm or deny. There were rumors of Walter Röhrl being approached, of Juha Kankkunen signing a preliminary contract. The logistics were in place, the team was ready, the cars were built, and then nothing. The cancellation of Group S didn't just kill the 222D, it essentially ended the era of unlimited rally cars. What followed, Group A, was safer, cheaper, more production-based, better for the sport long-term, absolutely. But something was lost. That pure expression of speed regardless of consequence. The 222D was the last gasp of an era when engineers were told make it as fast as physically possible without asterisks. Modern rally is incredible, don't get me wrong. The current world rally cars are faster than Group B ever was, statistically speaking. They're safer, more reliable, more spectacular to watch. But they're also homogenized, regulated to within an inch of their lives. Every team runs essentially the same car with different badges. The 222D represented a time when Toyota could build something completely different from what Audi or Peugeot was doing and see who had the better idea. In a parallel universe somewhere, the 222D became the template for all future rally cars. Everyone went mid-engine, and rally evolved into something even more extreme than what we have today. Or maybe it would have been a spectacular failure, proving that front engine was the way to go after all. We'll never know, and that's what makes it perfect. The 222D exists in this space where it can be anything we want it to be. Toyota learned from the 222D experience, though. When they returned to top-level rallying with the GT4, it was a more conservative design. Front engine, based on a production car, relatively conventional. But underneath, you could see the 222D's DNA. The all-wheel drive system, the turbo technology, the suspension design, all evolved from that cancelled monster. The GT4 went on to win multiple championships, something the 222D never got the chance to attempt. The ultimate irony, if Toyota had waited just one more year to develop the 222D, it probably would have raced. Group S was cancelled in 1986, but by 1987 the FIA was already looking at ways to make rallying spectacular again without the death toll. A slightly detuned 222D might have been perfect for what became the short-lived Group S2000 concept, but Toyota had already moved on, the moment had passed, and the 222D remained frozen in time as the ultimate what-if. Every time I see a modern Toyota pushing boundaries, the GR010 winning Le Mans, the GR Yaris dominating rallies, even the new GR Corolla being unnecessarily awesome, I think about the 222D. It's in Toyota's DNA to occasionally build something completely unreasonable just because they can. The 222D was patient zero for that particular infection, and thank God it's incurable, so next time someone tells you about a car that was too fast to race or banned for being too good, ask them if it was actually banned or just never got the chance to prove itself. Because there's a difference between being rejected and being orphaned by circumstance. The 222D wasn't banned because it was too powerful. It was abandoned because the world wasn't ready for what it represented. Maybe that's the real tragedy here. Not that the 222D never raced, but that we as a species looked at the absolute pinnacle of rally car engineering and collectively decided, nah, too much. We chose safety over spectacle, which was absolutely the right call. But still, a part of me wishes we lived in the timeline where Group S happened and the 222D got to show what it could really do. The 222D remains Toyota's greatest racing failure and possibly their greatest engineering success. It proved they could build anything, compete with anyone, push any boundary. It just happened to push those boundaries at exactly the wrong moment in history. And sometimes that's all that separates legend from footnote. Timing. That's the thing about banned race cars, especially ones that were banned before they even got to race. They become these perfect symbols of excess, ambition, and the eternal struggle between what's possible and what's sensible. The 2 Hutmund U2D is the patron saint of going too far, and in motorsport, that's about the highest honor you can achieve. Even if you achieve it by never turning a wheel in anger.